And hopefully we can get through the meeting on time and get out of here. So, hello, everyone. Welcome 2024. So, hopefully this is another fabulous year. I'm Mark Windschitl. I'm filling in. I'm the first vice chair, so I'm filling in for Jim, who is at the U.S. Conference of Mayors today. So I'll be filling in and taking that. So we'll call the meeting to order at 12:30. And we're going to start off with, we have a lot of new members. Oh, sorry, I'm already past something here. All right, we're gonna approve the agenda first.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and something that we, Elaine and I talked a little bit, when someone does that, say, motion by Johnson, second by Bailey, because it happens so fast and so many people out here, it just helps with that. So if we would do that, that'd be awesome. So we got a motion by Anderson and second by Bailey to adopt the agenda. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment today at the meeting? Not seeing anyone move, so we'll move past that. And I guess I kind of already gave a little bit of the report, and now we're going to go into, we have a lot of new members this year, so we're going to go through and introduce everyone. So first off, and maybe when I ask, just stand up so everyone can see you and just say who you are and who you're representing. So let's start with MnDOT. Connie?
Yeah, can I say a little bit too, or no?
I won't take your head off, they will.
Anyway, I am Connie Saibja. I'm obviously new back at MnDOT, recycled. The district engineer who sits in for the Commissioner of Transportation. Historically, that's always been the case. I was here 20-some years ago. A few folks like John and others were here at that time as well. I do want to talk about one memory that I have of this place, where we were battling funding for an interchange in the metro area. It was 169-494, and John knows that real well. And I remember when we were talking about it and taking a vote on it, half of this room was filled up with folks from Mankato and District 7. And I never forget that a district, an outstate district, would be lobbying and pushing for a project in the metro area. And to me, that was a great success. I think a great way of looking at things. And I see we have a lot of local partners here to work together, and regardless of the color of money and the jurisdiction, to advance projects. So I think I said way too much tonight.
Good report.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Connie. All right, and then in Council Tab District A, Doug Anderson was reappointed, and the alternate is Samantha McKinney. Is she here today?
I think she's just watching that one remote.
Okay. All right, and then in Council Tab District B is John Marast, and he's replacing Randy Maluchnik. John here?
He's not here.
Okay. And then in Council Tab District C, we have, I hope I say this right, who's Naya Bradley?
Yes, and she just walked in.
Who's Nia?
Who's Nia? And then, once you get seated here, we'll just maybe tell us who you're representing.
Of course.
We'll come back to her.
Yeah, circle back.
So Council Tab District D is Glenn Johnson's been reappointed, and Brandon Wagenfeld is the alternate. Is Brandon here? Stand up. So everyone can see you. So there's Brandon, and Glenn is here, yeah. Okay, and then in Transit, Amity Foster, excuse me, was reappointed, and then Timothy Marino is the alternate. Is Tim here? All right, look at there, he's got a name tag. Awesome. And then in Transit, we got Christopher Vaughn.
Hi, Christopher Vaughn, Transit.
welcome. And then the alternate is Nathan Herman. Is Nathan here? And Nathan's,
There's no R, but either way.
okay, I better wear my glasses. All right, non-motorized, Brian Martinson was reappointed, and then Alexander Ask was the,
Can't be here, he's got duty till 2:30.
okay, there's Brian. We know Brian. Anoka County, Julie Jepson was reappointed, and then Mike Gamache? Gamache? Oh, there's Mike. Welcome, thanks for being here. Carver County has got a new rep, John Fay.
John Fahey, Carver County Commissioner.
And are you working on an alternate then?
We still are.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And then St. Paul, we got Wajung Kim. She's right there, stand up, let everybody see who we are. She's representing St. Paul, and then Sarah Jost is the alternate. There's, okay. And then for Minneapolis, we have Oren Chowdhury, and she's not here, right?
Yeah, they're not getting, the Minneapolis appointments are being made January 25th. And I thought Maureen and Katie were both going to attend and to sit in the audience till they were appointed. Elliot was going to be here. I don't
So,
see him.
well, all right. And then we're going to go back to Miss Bradley, and you can introduce yourself.
Yes, hello, my name is Husnia Din Bradley, and I represent District 5 and 6, so District C.
Okay, welcome. All right, is there anyone that got missed? That's maybe an alternate or a member that didn't get at the table because it's full? I just want to make sure we get everybody. All right, one thing I thought would be helpful for when I first got on here, the new members are introduced, but sometimes we don't know who the people are here that we're working with. So let's just real quickly go around, say who you are, what you're representing, and just real quick, we don't have to go into any real depth, but I think it'd be good for the new members to know who they're sitting next to and what's going on. So I'll start with myself. I'm Mark Windschitl. I'm actually the mayor of Chaska, so I represent Metro Cities. And I am the first chair, so I'm filling in for Jim today. So we'll go this way to the left.
Elaine Koutsoukos, I'm the TAB coordinator, and I've met most of you already through orientation or from being here previously, so welcome.
Jenna Ernst, I staff the tab with Elaine.
John Ulrich, Scott County.
Doug Anderson, Citizen Rep A, former mayor of Dayton.
Gary Hansen, Egan City Council member representing the Suburban Transit Association.
Hwa-Jung Kim, she, her. I'm the vice president of the St. Paul City Council.
Glenn Johnson, already introduced, District D representative.
Amity Foster, she, her. I'm one of the transit reps.
Myron Bailey, mayor of Cottage Grove and Metro Cities rep.
Stan Karwoski, Washington County Commissioner, representing Washington County Board.
John Fahey, Carver County Commissioner.
George Schember, I represent freight transportation.
Peter Dugan, citizen member representing Dakota County and Eastern Scott.
Mark Stephenson, Mayor of Maple Grove and Metro Cities.
Julie Jepson, Anoka County Commissioner. City Council member Jess Robertson with the City of Blaine representing Metro Cities.
Brian Martinson, I've already been introduced.
Chris Geisler, Citizen Rep District E, which is Anoka County and Ramsey County.
Carl Crimmins representing the Minneapolis and St. Paul Airport.
Mark Jenkins, District Rep for District F.
Bill Endicke, District Rep for Area G, which is mostly Ramsey County.
Mary Louise Holberg, Dakota County.
Connie Saab, John MnDOT.
Janet Williams, Mayor Savage, representing Metro Cities.
And Chris Vaughn, he, him, one of the transit representatives.
Jeff Weisensell, Mayor of Rosemount, representing Metro Cities.
Trista Martinson, Chair of the Ramsey County Board and second Vice Chair.
All right.
Maureen.
Oh, so we have Irene, am I saying this right? Chowdhury?
You got it pretty close.
Well, we'll take that. If it's closer, it's good. So maybe just say who you are and who you're representing.
Yes. Hello, my name is Orveen Chowdhury, and I am a member of the Minneapolis City Council, so I am representing the city of Minneapolis.
Okay, awesome, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, there's John Morantz. Would you just, we kind of went around and introduced everybody, so maybe just tell everybody who you are.
John Morris, citizen representative for District 3.
We don't need to do that stuff. Okay, all right, great. Thanks, everyone, for doing that. I think in the long run, it'll help everyone. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to agency reports. So we'll start with MnDOT. Connie?
I don't have any agency report at this point.
Okay, that's a good report.
Yeah, I think you need to get some time back.
All right, then we'll go to MPCA. Anybody?
No, they're not here.
Nobody here? Yeah, flying through these. All right, Mac, Carl.
I have just a few, one little thing, really. At the airport, we're bringing in a new navigation system for takeoffs and landings, and it's being introduced by the government, the FAA. So if there's interest, there's going to be a Noise Oversight Committee meeting January 31st at 1:30 at the general office at 6040 28th Avenue South. The agenda will be available on the NOC webpage. It should be today, probably tomorrow. And you can attend the meeting in person or virtually. And it might clear up a lot of misconceptions and it'll be a lot of information handed out for people that board of the airport and your constituents. So I would recommend, if you go to the NOC webpage, you can log on and the agenda's on there. And like I say, you can attend the meeting in person or you can attend it virtually. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. We're going to move to Met Council, but Deb Barber is not here today, so Carlson's going to take care of it. Thank you, Charles, for filling in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and tab members. Charles Carlson, Executive Director for MTS, filling in for Deb with a brief update. Metro Transit and Met Council leaders spent several days riding light rail trains last week, stopping at stations to hear directly from riders about their experiences using light rail. The folks participating included Deb Barber, our tab member and Transportation Committee Chair, Council Chair Charlie Zelli, General Manager Leslie Candares, Police Chief Ernest Morales III, and Chief Operating Officer Brian Funk. Spent several days out on the trains, as I said, and talking with riders, and riders were appreciative of the opportunity to be heard and to share their praise as well as their frustrations, and feedback gathered will help inform ongoing efforts to improve conditions across the system, including a expanded onboard official presence and other strategies that are outlined in Metro Transit's continued implementation of their safety and security action plan. That's the report for the council.
Questions? All right, thank you. Jeni Hager is the TAC chair. She's still there, but I missed Gary. Sorry, STA. Sorry, Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Too fast.
And my report consists primarily of some ridership information for 2023 for the 4 suburban providers. Maple Grove Transit reported slow growth in express ridership and noted that growth primarily was in midweek, particularly Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The other days are a bit slower than that. My Ride microtransit service remains strong, and progress is being made in procuring small buses after some challenges in attempting to do that in 2023. Maple Grove Transit is planning significant transit station maintenance and repair and considering digital information and signage enhancements this year. Minnesota Valley Transit Authority's 2023 ridership increased 27% overall compared to 2022. This includes a 34% increase in weekend ridership and a 212% increase in special service ridership, due in large part to a significant increase in Renaissance Festival ridership. MVTA Connect microtransit service provided 110,000 rides in 2023, a 25% increase over the previous year. Plymouth Metrolink overall ridership increased 35% over the previous year. Click and Ride microtransit ridership increased 35% and 26% over 2019 pre-pandemic ridership. So a lot of progress being made there. And to meet that demand, they're planning to add more Click and Ride services this year. And finally, Southwest Transit total ridership was up 20% over 2022, with Prime up 28% to a record of more than 142,000 microtransit rides. And Southwest 494 corridor fixed route service is set to begin later this year. That's my report.
Questions? All right, thank you. Now, Jeni Hager is still the TAC chair for another year. So you said you had no report, or do you got a report? I have no report.
Mr. Chair, I'll just introduce myself for the new members. So my name's Jeni Hager. I am the TAC chair. I work for the city of Minneapolis, and I've been involved with the TAC tab planning process for a number of years. So happy to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that. All right, next item is approval of the meeting minutes from December 20th.
So moved, Anderson.
Geisler, second.
All right, we have a motion and second on the floor. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll move into consent business. Item 1 is 2024-06, streamlining the TIP amendment request for 3 project adjustments. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So 2024-06 is 3 amendments to the 2024 to 2027 TIP for existing projects. These TIP amendments are all related to MnDOT projects that are not funded from the regional solicitation. The first request is to reduce the project length of MnDOT's Highway 13 Signs and Catch Basin project in Savage and Burnsville. The second is to increase the cost and scope of MnDOT's Highway 36 project in Roseville, Maplewood, and Little Canada. This is a regionally significant project. However, the cost and scope increase do not require a public comment period. The cost is increasing from $13.8 to $16.8 million, and transportation management services are being added to the scope. And the third amendment will remove the IDIQ, which is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity designation from MnDOT's district-wide bituminous pavement crack treatments project. This is a cost decrease associated with this amendment, and these all items passed TAC with a unanimous recommendation for TAB to approve these amendments to the 2024 to 2027 TIP.
Questions for? Right, with that, then we would need a motion on 2024-06 streamlining TIP amendment request.
So moved, Jenkins.
Second.
Williams. So we got a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll move to non-consent items, and the first one is the selection of the TAB Executive Committee. You gonna do
Yeah,
that? Okay.
I will do that one in Jim Hovland's absence. Every year, the executive committee is selected. They meet in the even months of the year. The slate is, for the membership, is 2 county board members, a board member from the cities of first class, 2 board members from the remaining cities, one representing the citizen board members, and then 1 representing all the remaining agency or modal reps. And as part of your packet, we had, for the county board members, names that had been submitted were Debbie Gittell from Hennepin County and Mary Liz Holberg from Dakota County. When the packet went out, we did not have the cities of first class determined yet, but both Aureen Chaudhry and Hanglangjiao Kim did talk today, and Aureen Chaudhry is going to put her name on the slate. And then for board members, the remaining cities, we have Mark Windschitl and Mark Stephenson. For the citizen board members, we had nominations from Glenn Johnson and Peter Dugan, and then modal representative Brian Martinson. And so call on Glenn.
Oh, Member Johnson.
Yes, and so there are two citizens running for one seat. So Representative Dugan and I talked about this, and so I'm going to withdraw my name for this. I have plenty other stuff to be doing. You'll see my name pop up on active transportation. So that's an amendment.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Much appreciated.
Thanks for working together on making that happen, so appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
So then we have a full slate now.
Yeah, so we need a motion and a.
Okay. So at this point, all of the names are in place that we need the e-board for. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approval of the e-board.
Jepson moved.
Second.
Fahey second. Oh, no,
No,
Morris second.
Morris.
I've looked at the name tags.
Yeah. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Both same sign. Motion carries. All right, we move to item 2, 2024-02, adoption of the 2024 safety performance targets, and that is Ms. Hager again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just briefly introduce this item, and then Jed Hansen is going to come up and give you a more in-depth presentation on these. This is an item that comes forward annually, and these performance targets must be set in order to influence our planning and our metrics for programming. They're set annually. They follow and are informed by MnDOT statewide targets each year, and then our MPO has selected its own process for identifying its targets. So I'll bring Jed up here to go into more detail for you, and I just like to share that it's important to recognize that these performance targets are set within the context of our ultimate goal of 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our transportation network.
Hello, members of the TAB. My name is Jed Hansen. I am a planner in MTS, and I am here to present 2024-02, the annual adoption of the safety performance management targets. Today, I'm going to run through the regulatory requirements that spawn these targets, our target setting method in the Twin Cities area, the proposed targets that are in your action item today, and a brief assessment of recent years' performance. These safety targets come out of the Federal Highway Administration's Safety Performance Management Final Rule, which has the dual purpose of informing planning and programming to reduce fatal and serious injuries, as well as to track performance of the Federal Highway Safety Improvement Program. State departments of transportation and metropolitan planning organizations need to establish targets for 5 measures: the total number of fatalities and serious injuries and their respective rates per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and a combined measure of pedestrian and bicyclist fatal and serious injuries. Metropolitan planning organizations must set a target for each of these 5 measures, and they have 2 target setting options. They can establish targets that are specific to their metropolitan planning area, which is what our practice has been in recent years, or agree to support state DOT targets. Metropolitan planning organizations are not assessed or penalized by the Federal Highway Administration for failing to meet these targets. State DOTs are, however, and relative to their targets, it can affect how they allocate their Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. And we must adopt these each year by the end of February. Highway safety is just one of the several federally required performance targets. This is the one that's adopted most frequently. I believe it's the only annual one. However, there are a total of 6. FHWA has the safety performance target, the pavement and bridge conditions targets, system performance, freight, and congestion mitigation and air quality targets. And as a result of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a greenhouse gas emissions target. The FTA also has a transit asset management and a transit safety target that's not part of this action item today. The method that the Met Council has been using for the past few years has been to reduce targets on a straight line towards the regional share of the Minnesota Strategic Highway Safety Plan goals. So targets decline from a baseline of 2020 and holding over those targets into 2021 for our first year of this method. This was informed by some discussion during adoption of the 2020 safety targets. At various stages, we got some feedback that there was concern that adopting the state's methodology could result in increased targets if we had sustained years of poor safety performance. The state's methodology at that time was based on observed performance over time, and there was concern that if there were several years in a row where safety performance worsened, that our targets could increase, and that sends the improper message that more death and serious injuries on our roadways are somehow acceptable. So we were directed to form a work group to develop a methodology for use at the MPO level that consisted of members, or safety experts from MnDOT, county and city governments, and they arrived at this method that's based off of this mid-range target in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan that sets no more than 225 traffic deaths and 980 serious injuries in the state of Minnesota by 2025. And what this method does is it reduces on a straight line to reach that goal based off of our region's share of that goal. And our share of that goal is 74 traffic deaths, 464 serious injuries, and 115 pedestrian and bicycle traffic deaths and serious injuries not to exceed in 2025. In the action item today, it's proposed to continue the method that we adopted in 2021, which is to reduce those targets annually by approximately 8 fatalities, 69 serious injuries, and 17 non-motorized fatal and serious injuries. There's some slight variation from year to year from rounding, but that's approximately consistent. The target method is intended to be reconsidered next year. This is based off of a medium-range target in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is currently undergoing an update. And we're currently in discussions about safety's place in the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan. So next year is a natural opportunity to reevaluate this target setting method. This table here provides.
We got a,
Yes.
I'm going to pause you for a minute. I got a question from Member Geisler.
Thank you, Mr. Answer, just a quick question. When you say regional share, is that based on population, lane miles? How is that overall?
It's based off of historical performance and how much of the injuries that occur statewide occur in the metro area.
Okay, so it's based on performance, not any other demographic
Yes,
number.
correct.
Thank you.
So the table included here shows the previous 3 years of targets for each of these measures. Highlighted in gray there, the proposed targets for 2024, and then for context, that 2025 goal. So you are being asked to consider today adopting targets of no more than 82 fatalities at a rate of 0.29 per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, 532 serious injuries at a rate of 1.89 per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and a combined 131 non-motorized fatal and serious injuries. For some additional context, I've provided recent years of the Minnesota Department of Transportation statewide targets. They have made some adjustments to their methodology in recent years to reflect the worsened safety performance during COVID-19 and have held targets flat for either 3 or 4 years, depending on the measure, in recognition of that regression in safety performance. I'm not prepared to speak to the intricacies of the state DOT's methods. However, I'm happy to follow up with any questions that you may have with their performance staff. This table here provides the full information of safety performance against these measures for the past 3 full years of data that we have available and some partial data for 2023. At this point in time, we've only presented information January through October on this report. We've seen some preliminary information for the end of the year. However, it's still subject to quality assurance. So I hope to provide that as this advances to the Metropolitan Council for its consideration. But as you can see, we only met our targets in recent years in 2020, and that was just in the all serious injuries and the non-motorized targets. Since then, we have not been meeting our targets. And I would point out that in several of these instances, the current performance is exceeding actual performance and target performance in earlier years. This is the same information presented graphically. The blue line represents the target and the orange line represents actual performance. And there are two additional lines on there, a light orange line that shows the January through October results for 2023, and then a dashed trend line that is an estimate of where we can expect the year-end figures to end up based off of a seasonal history of crash incidences. So for fatalities, we're expecting that 2023 will be a marked improvement from the peak in 2021, but remain elevated over the pre-pandemic totals. I'll also note that these preliminary data that I'm presenting are just for the 7-county metro. These targets do apply to our whole urbanized planning area that includes parts of Wright and Sherburne counties. And that's for the simplicity of reporting, but when we present full performance figures, it will include those areas. For serious injuries, this chart shows how we had been meeting our regional targets for a period of 2 years before COVID-19 resulted in a setback from previous improvements in safety performance. It does appear that this may be a leveling off. However, I'll remind folks that there's some randomness to crash incidences, and 1 to 2 years of change doesn't necessarily represent a trend. And it's essentially the same pattern here between the serious injuries and the non-motorized fatal and serious injuries as far as the direction that injury totals are heading. We present the combined figure of pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities and serious injuries because that is the regulatory figure that we report. However, we've disaggregated that information for you here for your interest and because it is a more useful tool for planning. You'll notice that in most of the measures, safety performance in 2023 appears to be improving over 2022. However, in most of these measures, this is still significantly elevated over the 3-year average that was before the COVID-19 pandemic. Pedestrian fatalities are up about 22% from that point in time, pedestrian serious injuries up 8%, and bicyclist serious injuries up 19%. Bicyclist fatalities are down slightly, although those are thankfully rare, and so the percentage change by one incident can be larger. Ultimately, these targets are a tool for assessing our regional performance at advancing safety work. There are 2 areas I'll briefly describe here today. Through the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan, we have heard through engagement with policymakers, city staff, and other targeted groups that safety is a top priority for our region. And we have a working objective that we've been developing the plan with that states people who do not die or face life-changing injuries when using any form of transportation. And this objective is supported by draft safety policies and actions that we have developed through a special working group of regional experts and 3 broad stakeholder workshops. And we look forward to sharing drafts of that information with you in future meetings. This is also being supported by the Regional Safety Action Plan, which is a consulting study that's underway. This study will develop recommendations both for the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan as well as recommendations for our funding programs. Some of the major components of this study include developing a regional high injury streets identification, a summary of crash trends that will probably answer a lot of the questions I bet you have that I don't have today, and a systemic analysis of crash risks that's based off of infrastructure factors and historical crash information. Those are being developed with study teams that are reviewing the methods and preliminary findings right now. With that, I will stand for any questions.
So questions, I know Member Martinson has a question.
Yeah, thanks. I have a few questions, but I think maybe you said in your very last sentence about crash trends. So you're disaggregating not just whether it's auto or a pedestrian or bike, if it's impaired? Is it from a high-speed chase? Are you breaking down that, what's the cause of the crash?
I don't know the specific measures off the top
Okay.
of my head. Yes, we are looking at those sort of factors, like is impairment a factor, is speed a factor? A lot of the times, there are many factors involved in a crash, and that is
Weather,
part of that
lighting.
study.
Got
Yes.
it. And then will we actually receive the whole report, or will we only get the recommendations that the team is reviewing? Because I think it's important for all of us as we go back to our own municipalities as we set policy and planning objectives as well.
Yes. So generally, it's our practice to post these study findings on our website. I don't know the exact form that will bring forward results to the tab, but I will take that back to the study team and make sure they know that there's interest in that information. One of the cool things about this study is it will provide 2 interactive mapping applications that provide that regional high injury streets and systemic, the crash risk analysis. And that's intended to be shared with local partners to inform their project programming.
Thank you.
Member Gibson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things, so thank you very much for the information. What I'm curious about is, so because of the excessive, extreme increase in the crash rates, in the fatalities, in the serious injuries, the Walz administration created the Advisory Council on Traffic Safety, of which AMC, Association of Minnesota Counties, appointed me to that. And I'm wondering, I have mentioned this to the collective tab before, but for the new folks, but we only meet about quarterly or 6 times a year. And after those meetings, I will report if there's anything to report back to this committee. However, I think it would really be beneficial if the 2 groups partner. So do you know if there's a seat on that advisory council for Met Council, or any consideration you're taking for that group to input?
Yes, we have a staff member on that council.
Come on up.
Heidi Schulberg, who's our lead safety planner.
Great, thank you. Second question, if I could be so bold. Oh, shoot, I totally forgot it. Gosh, dang it. Don't look at me. What the heck? Never
Anyone
mind.
else have a question why she's trying to remember who? Connie?
Yeah. I might get myself in trouble with my own agency, but I didn't hear anywhere talking about 0 deaths. I come from a culture where you don't talk about any number but 0. Having a goal of killing 250 people, I don't think that's a good thing. And you being in safety, you understand that. So I don't know where I guess it's all systematic. You're going to get there. Maybe you never will. But setting a goal other than 0, I cannot understand it. I couldn't vote for it myself. So,
Mr. Chair, member, I really appreciate that question, because this is one of the routine difficult things that every year when I come up here, it's so difficult to bring this presentation because ultimately I'm talking to you about death. And we do have a long-term goal in the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan that supports towards 0 deaths. There is not a specific adopted year in there. And these are short-term targets intended to track our progress towards that goal. I will say there are some examples of other jurisdictions setting their targets to 0. The state of Florida and several of their MPOs do set their safety targets to 0. The Federal Highway Administration actively discourages this, however, because they're intended to be a progress marker with the acknowledgement that we won't get to 0 tomorrow. It's really a long-term effort. So I appreciate and I agree with your response and the inherent difficulty of this decision.
quick follow-up. Back in the day in 2003, when the region and the state took it seriously, and we being at MnDOT, we made some major changes and we cut it over, it was 800 fatalities per year in 2003. After doing seriously working with the locals and making some big changes, it was cut in half within a year. And then it kept going down, and then now the world changed, and now it's going back. So I'm glad we're doing, hopefully we are doing bold things to reduce that, but are we going to vote on a number later? I can't vote on it.
All right, thank you. Member Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. A couple comments to just get this going. I had the same thought last year when I had to vote on this target. I mean, it feels bad to vote on this. Anything besides zero feels terrible. And again, I think the other part that I just want to make as like a comment is that there are other cities, I mean, just not local and not in the US, that actually have gotten down to single digits, if not zero, for traffic fatalities. Like, this is a doable thing. I do want to highlight for any new members in this room, when we approved the scoring system for the 2024 regional solicitation, we upped the safety points for all the scoring because of this type of data. I mean, this is something that we have within our power at TAB to do. And I know there's a lot of people who maybe disagree about a lot of stuff, but everyone in this room said safety is important. So I think that was a really cool thing that came out of last term. And then a specific question I have about the details to what the data gives you and doesn't. So I know there's discussion about local streets versus highways. I mean, you could talk about the regional area. So maybe I'm getting to Commissioner Martinson's point about like how detailed can we get to sort of examine this, and like what are you actually looking at for getting at root causes?
So I'll give two answers to that. For the purposes of this action item, we exclusively look at the top line figures since we're reporting out progress on the safety targets. As far as the root causes of the crashes, it is a mixture of our technical capability of the level of analysis we can perform and the quality and detail in the data that we get from the Department of Public Safety. There is a constant partnership to improve our work in that area. I am not the expert in analysis of safety data, so I can't really speak to the various variables that we have available to us, but there is many more levels of detail than you're seeing here that we can look at.
Okay. Yeah, again, I think I'm, with other members, seeing the full data would be good, even if it's not an action item before us. Also, as an aside, this is really fun. You're my neighbor, so I get to talk to you about this. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Karofsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the report. Number of questions. To me, it's really important to get the cause, and it should be in the report. To me, the report kind of implies it's what we do with our roads. I'd be surprised if more than half the accidents weren't caused due to whether the road condition, weather of the roads, distractions such as cell phones and other things. So until we get the causes, it's really hard to make improvement. I do agree with the comments about setting a death number total. I kind of like you working towards zero. So first of all, can we get the causes? Are you working that? This doesn't mean much to me unless we can center on the causes.
Yes, that work is being performed as part of the Regional Safety Action Plan. One additional information I'll provide in there is that the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan, through its policies and actions, is advancing a concept in safety planning we call the safe system approach. And it fully acknowledges those behavioral characteristics that do occur in crashes, but also acknowledges that there are things that we can do that when those behaviorally caused crashes occur, they can perhaps be more forgiving. A common example that I prefer to give is imagine you have an intoxicated driver who departs from the roadway. There could be roadway features like cable median barriers or crash attenuation devices that might, not prevent that crash from occurring, but it might make it less severe. And so that person, despite their human mistake of getting behind the wheel intoxicated, doesn't necessarily have their life lost. So it's kind of a whole picture.
Right, but I think if we get this data, we can appropriate, maybe it's better investing towards not using alcohol rather than spending an abundance amount of money on the road to correct it to prevent the alcohol costs. Same with cell phone, we can attack that. The other thing is, two other questions. Be nice to get this by county per county. because I'd like to have the report, not only with the causes, but the data from Washington County, because we can only fix our roads. Is that available?
I have it. I don't have it in this presentation. I'll provide you an update when we get the year-end 2023.
Maybe each county would want their own.
Would you send that to Elaine, and then Elaine can distribute, please?
It's still good to get the total data. And then lastly, I noticed in the years 2019 to 2020, roughly, I'm gonna use all serious injuries, but all injuries kind of dropped around then. It got below the target. That was before COVID. What, for those few years, what explains that?
I think we're still learning the answer to that. And part of the Regional Safety Action Plan will seek to address that. I think one of the most commonly understood things that we can reasonably infer is that speed related to reduced congestion has increased the severity of crash outcomes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Jepson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate everybody's patience with me on this one, but I am glad I forgot because what I was remembering is more appropriate for this conversation and the causes. And I don't know if anybody caught it, but in the Star Tribune, there was a included article by the Washington Post regarding light as a cause for major pedestrian and bike accidents, especially during the hours of 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. when we're at our darkest here, but when we're driving our cars, our phones are on, our screens are on, and the absolute increase in those fatalities and very serious accidents for those pedestrians during that time, because we have so much light noise that we're dealing with now once the smartphones and the screens in our cars showed up. So if you have that access, if you know what article I'm talking about, or I can send it to you, if anyone's interested in reading it.
It was a really good article. I think one of the interesting.
You're gonna, hold on, if you're gonna speak on it, you'd have to come up here, because otherwise they won't hear, or grab a microphone somewhere.
Hi, Nathan, transit alternate. I think the interesting point about that article too was that the deaths increased after dark, regardless of what time of year it was. So summer, winter, didn't matter if it was 6 p.m. If it was dark at one time of the year, they increased. So just the overall, I just thought that was an interesting point to point out.
Thank you. Julie, you're good?
Sorry, and I just wanted to speak on Connie's, your comment. Yes, one death is too many. 82 makes my stomach turn. Absolutely. I don't like the sound of that, because we're saying, yes, we're okay with 82 people dying, which I don't think any of us are. However, the phrase is towards zero deaths. And so we have to start at a place to get to that zero, because we didn't just start at one point and then skyrocket to the skyrocket. It was a gradual process. So going back down also needs to be a gradual process, in my opinion.
And I think some of that additional information will help that as well, as it comes out and county by county can look at it, so. You're good?
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah, thank
Member
you.
Martinson,
Yeah,
this one.
Yeah, the other
You're
yeah,
next.
The other Martinson, then that one. It's a tag team. I'm thinking about recommendations, so I just want to put a plug in as we're talking at the recommendations that might come back. So often we get recommendations solely around the road and a car, right? But I think that I'm hoping that there'll be recommendations specifically segregated by if it's pedestrian, bike, and how we then, protected bikeways, separated guideways for bikes and pedestrians with medians and barriers, those kinds of things, so that we're really getting to how do we get to zero deaths in all of those modalities. And then also to hear from staff as we go deeper on safety and safety design, where there are sore spots in the system so that we can address them instead of just staying at high level and then we never really move this target, that we can really dig deep. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that.
Thank you. I'll take that back to the study team.
Thanks.
Thank you. Member Martinson.
So my comment is timely because I'm gonna add to what Member Martinson has, or what the other Member Martinson has already offered. Is this on? I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Is there anyone on the call, or is everybody here in the room today? All right, I'll try to just speak loudly. So I'm reminded every year when we look at these things that setting targets is one thing, and I think it's valuable, obviously, for tracking performance. We're not meeting the goals year after year after year. And to the extent that that has impacts on the HSIP funding, okay, good, so be it. It should change. But every year we don't hear what the interventions or the actions are that are being taken to get us below those targets. So I would like to make a request that we actually get to see some of that at some point as well, and I'm not sure if that's within your purview or not, but somebody should have that responsibility to bring that back to tab. I'm also reminded that, and I'm gonna make an motion for an amendment to this, is what I'm gonna do at the end of this little rant. So last year, the dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, whose name now eludes me, and some of her students, and maybe former students, published a paper on a safe systems approach that adopts an approach that has been used for decades in public health. I've asked that they come and speak to this body, and I want to reiterate that request, that we bring them here at some point soon this year to come and speak to us about that, because they propose a safe systems approach that actually applies a coherent theoretical framework as opposed to the one that's been proposed by the Federal Highway Administration, which generally just lacks any theoretical coherence. I like the idea of thinking of things systemically. That's important, and that's how this has to be addressed. But we need a solid theoretical underpinning, and I believe that those authors offer something in that regard. So I hope that they will come and speak to us about that. So then I want to finally make an amendment in response to.
Well, I'm going to stop you. There is no motion at this point, so we don't have to make an amendment.
All right, I'll hold my amendment.
So I got two other people if you want to hold off, and then we can do that at that point. But there is, at this point, this is all discussion. All right, Member Geisler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak a little bit on the 2050 TPP group, working on that group, and how one of the big conversation points we had was to make sure that this focuses on all transportation modalities, not just pedestrian, not just bicycle, not just cars, also transit. All aspects of it is being baked into that's what we've requested come out of this. So it really is going to be a holistic view of improving safety in all modes of transportation that are out there. So I do think that emphasis is coming. I think the other thing, just to remind folks too, so as Member Johnson mentioned, we upped safety score at the last regional solicitation cycle. That money still hasn't hit projects yet. So, there is a natural lag with what this body decides to do with when those projects actually are built and completed. So just reminding folks of a decision we made last year and a result the following year may not be because of us. It may be because of other initiatives that are going on. So just keep that framework in mind. The one other question that I had for Member Hanson here was, it would be really interesting to understand, for the accidents that did occur that were not a fatality but were a serious or minor injury, what aspects of the design of the roadway, say, following the safe systems approach, theoretically or hypothetically downgraded that accident or downgraded that? And some level of that, I understand you probably don't have it right now, but understanding that these are the things that we are funding and supporting that are downgrading away from the fatality and getting it to maybe just a serious injury or a minor injury or a near miss. And understanding those things based on the actual accidents that occurred and where we saw, yep, that was an accident that could have been a fatality, but the cable barrier did prevent a fatality or a cross median happening or something like that. That would be a really valuable piece of information to add to this.
Thank you, Member Geisler. That suggestion's well taken. I'm not prepared to answer the feasibility of it, but I will take it back to our team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Kim?
My point is moot. I appreciate both Second Chair Martinson and the other Martinson's comments. So just drop in a ditto.
Thank you. Member Johnson?
I got a text from a friend who's watching live saying I erased Hoboken, New Jersey in my conversation about having Vision Zero successful. I'm not sure if it's zero or it's single digits, but again, building on Member Martinson's comments, I think it'd be good as an info item to talk about places that have set precedent. Maybe, the more local, the better. We're a metro group, but if there's a city doing it, that'd be great to learn what they're doing well. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Amity.
Thank you. I just have a question. Is there any planning or visioning or dreaming done on what it would actually take to get these numbers to zero in the next 5 years? If it's something we all want, what would it take to get there?
I do not have a good answer for that because I'm a stark realist and I highly doubt zero in 5 years would be possible simply due to the lag that Member Geisler mentioned in our planning and programming process. It does take time for safety outcomes to be realized in physical infrastructure.
So, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So what would be a realistic timeline to get to zero? It's kind of an unfair question, I guess, but also like if it is a priority, what does it take from the tab
Yes.
and the council to get us to zero in a timeline that we can see?
I appreciate the challenge of the question. And this is where I will draw back to that safe systems approach. There are many factors that can be addressed to help improve safety outcomes. Within the TAB's range of influence, those physical capital infrastructure things are the areas that you have the most direct power over. But there's more legs to the safety stool than that.
So I guess maybe just more agitational to this room. If we want to get to zero, the tab has the power and the influence to do that, but it means more projects that are creating the physical barriers. If someone is drunk driving, are they going to kill themselves and someone else on the road, or are they going to be safe? We're the body that can move some of that faster.
I mean, sitting here listening to all these comments, and I think it's important for us to look at these goals and set these goals. And I mean, obviously, we all want zero, but we can't do this alone. I mean, where do the insurance companies come in and the safety councils, all these things? I don't think we as TAB, I mean, we have to set these numbers, but we can't do this alone. This is a giant step and giant leap in mankind to get it. I mean, really, for us alone, it's just got to spread out and really start in the high schools. I mean, really, where they start driving is to talk about some of these things. So, Connie.
I'm sorry for jumping in again, but I really appreciate the passion. I think that's how things start. History is repeating itself. Again, myself being old enough to have gone through these questions back in, we took some serious actions, but we were able to cut it in half in 1 year. And our goal always was, how do we get to zero and how long does it take? This is the DOT talking and working in partnership with all the rural counties and metro counties. I would like to remind us that this region, Minnesota, I know we're looking at federal guidance. Minnesota has been always way ahead of what federal government proposes, and I think we should look at it that way. We're always one of the top 5 states in the country that leads in initiatives in taking these actions that are that's out of norm, and it's innovative. And there is, for example, the initiative we had. Quickly, Mr. Chair, it was called 4E. I only remember 3 of them because I'm older. It's engineering, education, and enforcement. Enforcement was a big part of it. Worked with patrol and engineering of a road. Now we have the technology of AI, artificial intelligence, where you can predict, as predictive models, you can predict where accidents could happen based on data that we have. Ms. Martinson, Commissioner Martinson, was saying, looking at the data, and so anyway, I think we should let's take these comments and challenge ourselves to And yes, I think we can have a say in it, but as the chair says, it takes everybody to
All right,
do
thank
it,
you. I think we'll take Peter's question, or Member Dugan, and then I think we'll, oh, there's one more, sorry. Mr. Dugan.
I can defer to the person ahead of me?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Hampton, thank you, as always. Really good information. In terms of Member Karwoski's, or Commissioner Karwoski's, and everyone is asking for causes, do we have, or do we gather information on individual causes such as a driver with a suspended license, former DUIs, distracted, not stopping for a stop sign? I mean, those are things that we can't prevent, but, on an enforcement side, that could have some action. Because, and anecdotally, for my job, I drive lots, and the increase in speed is pretty significant. And crossing lanes without directional signals are just, yeah, it's noticeable. And I think most experts say it's a hangover from COVID driving when there was less people on the road and road rage rose. The other question I had, in the non-motorized sense, are we looking at, in education, to your point, sir, I'm seeing a proliferation of scooters, electric bikes that can do 33 miles an hour, electric bikes used as delivery vehicles, not stopping at stop signs, on sidewalks. I mean, that's an education, I think, that, rolling electric skateboards, all these new forms of transportation, if you will, coming in that, are not regulated, and I'm not sure if they're even counted in terms of, because that's becoming, to me, we're seeing it now happening, and we could maybe make an impact now, not 10 years from now. But myself, I was almost injured by someone on the sidewalk with a vehicle, not an automobile.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jed.
So for the first part of the question, some of the circumstances you answered, yes, we'd have data for them. Some of them we would not. Like, it may be possible to ascertain it, but I'm not sure if it's readily available, like, say, for example, criminal history. On the second part of your question as to, like, who is included in these new mobility devices, generally this data set includes crashes on public roadways involving vehicles. So I do not believe, I need to double check on this, that a bicycle crash would not be included. I think that is captured in more like public health style data sets. So that circumstance you mentioned, I don't believe would be captured here.
If I may, Mr. Chair, not to prolong it, but it would seem to me that, again, with the proliferation of these alternative transportation methods, we're going to have injuries from those. And that, if that's not counted, then it's kind of a false, not false, but it's just focusing. And I would be interested, not asking you to do this, sir, but are we talking with 30% of the drivers causing 80% of the injuries because they're suspended license, they don't have a license, drunk driving, impairment, previous history? I mean, how many of us do we read in the paper, so-and-so caused a fatal crash and they've had 3 DUIs. Well, why are they driving? And that's, I would suspect that probably a pretty high percentage is caused by driver safety, driver error, as opposed to road error. But I'm not an engineer like you, sir, from MnDOT. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Jed.
Member Chowdhury. Chowdhury.
Thank you, Chair. I am really excited to hear this conversation, and this is literally one of the reasons why I jumped at the opportunity to be a part of the TAB, was to get to dig in on things like challenging goals that we have so we can improve people's lives. And what I'm hearing out of this body is we want to figure out the cause of why we're seeing pedestrian injury and death, and we want to figure out how, and we want to reduce the number of people who die, but also that goal of 2050. We want to bring that number down. We want to strive for more. And the offering, I think I can bring in as a representative of Minneapolis and someone that cares a lot about reducing pedestrian injuries specifically in the community that I represent, is I feel really passionate about the Vision Zero pledge that the city of Minneapolis took. Setting out a goal to coordinate efforts around engineering, public safety, health, and community outreach so we could reduce those numbers. And we took that pledge in 2017 with the goal of getting to zero in 10 years. And I think the reason why we're successful, apart from relying on subject matter experts, I know we have a lot around the table and collaborating, but is because we're not alone. It's not just us. We're in a community of 45 other cities or localities that have also taken this pledge. And I think an offering that I could bring to this group, and I'm learning how this body functions. So if someone, Chair, if you want to let me know if there's a way to do this, is if there's a presentation we could get from the Vision Zero Network nationally or from Minneapolis that might give some insight on the questions that we could ask it as a body, or how we could collaborate and coordinate efforts, because I don't want Vision Zero just in Minneapolis. I want it throughout our state and throughout our region.
Okay, thank you. I think that you've got enough guidance out of this group that I think at this point, unless somebody really has something important that hasn't been shared, I would look at this point, is there someone willing to make a motion of 2024-02?
I would like to move with an amendment.
Yeah.
We got to have a motion first, though.
All right, that's fine, I'll wait.
So move, Foster.
He can make a motion of whatever you want.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be an amendment, it'd be a motion.
So you can make,
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the targets with the addition of the statement that the targets are no more than these numbers of deaths and maimings. Well, you don't have to use the word maimings, I guess, but you know what I mean by that. And I would also, I saw in the documents we received that there had been discussion of the inclusion that maybe would help Connie to vote for this, that in fact, the ultimate goal is zero deaths. And I would like to see that included in this approval of those targets. So that is my motion. I couldn't find the language, the actual, specific language that we're approving here. So I don't know how to frame that, but that is my proposal.
Hasn't it always been toward zero deaths? Hasn't that been the mission?
So in the motion, we've always just put the numbers. These numbers are always considered to be not to exceed. We forward this motion, or the business document, to the Federal Highway Administration to report, and they interpret that to mean that, as do we. I do not see an issue with adding the clarifying language that Member Martinson has proposed.
Okay. All right. All right, so we have a motion by Member Martinson.
Second by the other Martinson.
Oh, the Martinsons. Martinson. Member Martinson, I'm going to have you re-say what you're amending, so that it's correct.
So I'm moving approval of the targets as presented to us today by Jed, Mr. Hanson. And with the amendment that the language include the statement that the targets are to be understood by everybody involved as no more than this number of deaths or serious injuries. And that the ultimate goal of this target setting is a Vision Zero concept of zero deaths, ultimately.
Okay. All right. We have that up here. So again, we have a motion, second, Martinson, and you don't get to say that very often. So with that, is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign? Okay.
Thank you.
Motion passes. All right, thank you for all that lively discussion, so. All right, next we'll move to 2024-03, scope change request for South St. Paul on Marie Avenue bicycle and pedestrian facility.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The scope change request for South St. Paul project, the city was awarded $1 million in the Safe Routes to School category to improve safety and non-motorized connectivity along Marie Avenue between 3rd Avenue and 9th Avenue, and on 2nd Street and 7th Avenue. However, Dakota County also had a library project in the area, so the city coordinated the implementation of their improvements on 2nd Street and 7th Avenue with the county's project. They contributed nearly $1.5 million to complete improvements that had originally been included in their regional solicitation application. The city is requesting a scope change to remove the improvements along 2nd Street and 7th Avenue from their Safe Routes to School project while retaining their full federal funding, given those improvements have been made and with a coordinated project. So recent precedent has been to not remove federal funding with scope changes when the proposal is to remove elements but deliver them with a coordinated project, which is the case here. TAC unanimously recommends approval of this scope change with no reduction in federal funding.
Questions?
Mr. Chair.
Member Geisler.
Chair Hager or potentially Elaine, just wondering where we're at with staff's recommendation for the scope change language as far as retention, safe delivery versus moving from precedent to policy. I know we've discussed it probably for 2 years now, especially with all the changes that have been coming. So just wondering where we're at with an official policy.
Mr. Chair, Member Geisler, I know the committee has met a few different times. They've got some draft language. They're not quite done with their work, and I'll bring a more thorough update back maybe next month if that's okay.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Member Holbrook.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval.
Second. We got a motion, second by Liddicky. All right, motion and second on floor, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next moves to item 4, 2024-04, scope change request for and tip amendment for Inver Grove Heights curb ramp reconstruction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So another scope change request. Inver Grove Heights was awarded $250,000 in round numbers in the pedestrian facilities category to make pedestrian curb ramp upgrades. The city is requesting to remove 4 curb ramps from the original proposal to upgrade 30 curb ramps. 2 of the ramps were completed with another project, and the other 2 ramps the city has determined will be eliminated. For the 2 ramps proposed to be eliminated, these ramps were located mid-block and did not have ramps or a sidewalk connection across the street. So eliminating these ramps was deemed a safer option than upgrading their design. Recent precedent has been to not remove the federal funds with scope changes when the proposal is to remove elements but deliver them with a coordinated project. This is the case with 2 of the 4 ramps in question. For the other 2 ramps, the amount of federal funding was estimated at $16,682. TAC deemed this amount of federal funding to be de minimis and unanimously recommends approval of the scope change with no reduction in federal funding.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Member Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to highlight one thing, and again, I support this one. I'm going to vote for it. But there was one strange thing that came up, and it came up in our info session on Monday. And maybe you can just illuminate with whatever you actually do know about this. But in one of the design plans, it was a mid-block crossing are the 2 that are going to be removed in this. And again, very small amount of money. But it was strange that the original proposal must have included these as well for it. And they cross, the cross street goes into a parking lot. And so when they talk about there being this safety impact, none of the things have actually changed as far as we could tell from when they submitted. So we were curious why, how it became a safety issue if it wasn't when they submitted.
Mr. Chair, Member Johnson, the city did respond to some written questions after that information session, And, when a project is scoped, it's oftentimes at a very high level. And as they went into more details to deliver their project and did their community engagement, they deemed those crossings to be not as safe as they wanted them to be. Those mid-block crossings in particular can be challenging if they don't have appropriate sight lines or markings to notify users of the roadway that there is a mid-block crossing. So they felt that there was a safer solution.
Excellent. Yeah, it was a strange one. Thank you for actually following up and getting this back to us in a day. That's very impressive. Thank you.
Right, anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval of Holberg.
Holberg approval.
Second Johnson.
Second Johnson. Again, that's on 2024-04 for Inver Grove Heights curb ramp reconstruction. Scott, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Motion carries. All right, we're going to move into our information session. And first thing we got is 2024 regional solicitation update by Mr. Peterson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. First on the member guys or your question on the scope change policy, we've had 2 or 3 meetings of that subcommittee and are making good progress on that. So expect something to come back for your consideration next few months here on that. So we got 2 presentations, 2 different timeframes, and I'll kind of explain where we're at on that. The first is the 2024 regional solicitation. So that's the process that we're in the midst of right now. And first, a moment of maybe gratitude for all the applicants. 127 applications came in for the money, which is on par with what we usually see. There is a table that was in the agenda item that has all the details by mode and by application type for what that was. Also, thanks to Elaine here, who fielded probably several thousand questions over the last 2 months throughout this process. So thanks to Elaine there. So $445 million of project requests that came in for roughly $250 million that we have available. Total projects just under $1 billion of requests, which is a little surprising to me given all the money that's been injected into the system here in the last 2 years and solicitations out there at the moment that we're still requesting about the same amount as we are every cycle. And we had a record amount of money available last year, $355 million. So a few asks of this group here. First and foremost, we have started the scoring committees for all the technical scoring committees. So that's technical experts across the region from many of your agencies are volunteering to be part of scoring committees. That process has began. Similar to last time, we do have a unique projects category where we received 6 applications. Last cycle that was scored at your request by TAB members. And so again, we'll be asking for volunteers if you'd like to help score those 6 unique project requests that we did receive. Be over the next 2 months. It'd probably be 10 to 20 hours of work. You'd have to review the applications, score them. We'd meet probably 2 or 3 times to introduce the scoring, go through the scoring, come to some consensus, and send those scores back through the committee process. So 10 to 20 hours of work. And last time I think people maybe underestimated how much work it was going to be to score these applications, those that were involved. So if you would like to be part of that unique project scoring committee, please let Elaine know here, preferably in the next week. So one question I see, Mr. Chair.
He's volunteering.
Oh, he's
Are you volunteering or a
Okay,
question?
even better.
Oh.
Yes, actually. So I do have a comment. I just want to, as somebody who scored last year, I just wanted to provide a little perspective for other TAB members. This is one where we're stepping from governance to a technical kind of role of providing people a score and the answers of what we think their project is, competitively speaking. So if you do want to raise your hand for it, please make sure you dedicate the time to give these applicants reasons why you scored them a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. We owe that to them if you decide to score it. So it is a time commitment, but it's the projects are really interesting to read. The write-up is really good. Staff does a great job guiding us. So just make sure you have the time to sit and read an application and then score it and write down why you scored it that way. So please.
And then the second part of that, did you volunteer?
I will volunteer for consistency's sake, yes.
You said yes and yes, so I'm assuming that was both.
We have one.
Elaine?
So, and,
He's comment.
okay.
Go ahead, should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I just had a comment and a kind of a comment question. We had some dissatisfaction with the scoring of the unique projects. There was a 1 to 5 scoring, and there wasn't enough differentiation with 1 to 5. So I hope you've fixed that, if you've made it 1 to 10 or something, or what are you gonna fix it so there'll be more definition?
Elaine, you want to jump in?
Differentiation.
Yep.
Yeah, based on the recommendations from TAB, you voted to have a scoring differentiate of 9
Okay,
points.
all right, I didn't recall that.
So that's been included in the scoring metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Remember, Dugan, did you have your hand up? I don't remember.
No, Mr.
No?
Chair.
Okay, sorry. Ms. Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a process question. Can alternates be on that scoring committee?
Don't look at me.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay,
If we,
great.
we need, I think we had about 7 scorers last time. Like I said, we have 6 applications to score. There's 5 measures in the applications. So that it's, and what you'd be doing is reading each of the 6 and scoring measure 1 against each of how they responded and do that.
And folks should just let you know?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Now remember Dugan.
Thank you. To respond to Commissioner Ulrich and Chris, remember, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we went with the 9 points, so there wouldn't be a middle range, wouldn't be 5 out, so you have to make a decision one way or the other. That's the reference for the odd number. Yep. Mr. Gasser, am I correct on that?
I believe that is how we changed it to, but the why is the big part.
Yeah, I'm sorry, excuse me?
Explaining why you
Oh,
scored
yes,
it.
yes, yes.
That's the hard part, and that's the time-consuming part.
Thank you.
With the
Thank you,
last
Mr.
round,
Chair.
there was 6 measures, and the scoring ranged from, between 1 and 5 on each. So if they scored 2 on one measure, 4 on another, by the time the totals were done, depending, some applications were stronger on one measure than the other, and the totals came out so close to the same at the end. So that was why spreading out the totals.
Right, you're right.
So we still at 1 volunteer, so just wanted to, 2 volunteers.
Right. And
Now we're at 2. Now we're at 3.
we're gonna
I feel like an auction here. Hold on now. So the other Martinson, not the one next to me, wants in. Member Morse. Am I saying that right? Morris?
Mr. Chair?
And then one of our alternates in the back, but I got a reminder of name.
Tim Marino.
Mr. Chair? In the
Yes.
interest of time and a public record, maybe people can send Elaine an email
Yep, sorry, it
instead
just,
of.
all of a sudden the hands were going up. All right,
Yep.
back to you, Mr. Peterson.
We're
Thank
going to
you.
have 3 different committees that we're going to be asking about here, so just keep that in mind over the next two presentations here. So the process moving forward, we're looking to get to a decision by TAB in July, at the July TAB meeting. So scoring, next few months, funding scenarios into the spring, and then July decision. This is a slide, and we can come back to this in future months too for more explanation, but with some of the new funding programs that came with IIJA, we have new funding sources plus the regional sales tax, which we're active transportation. So we have different funding sources and different years with money available. And the thing that maybe jumps out on this page is the active transportation sales tax is the money is being collected as we speak. But most of the money, the bulk of the money is in 28 and 29, so projects 4 to 5 years out. And we'll get into some of these more in future presentations, just in the interest of time here. But it's good to just maybe see this on paper and have a record of the sources and amounts that we're going to be talking about. So, Mr. Chair, that's that one. We do have a second presentation too, pending any questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. And Molly Stewart from SRF is joining me here. She's the project manager for the regional solicitation evaluation. So we just talked about 2024. Now we're moving on a parallel track for 2026 and beyond. So this is a multi-year process that we're just starting out with the help of a full consultant team called the Regional Solicitation Evaluation. And people may remember we did this 10 years ago. A few of you were still around where we did this process. So we are proposing some additional committees that we are going to ask for volunteers from. And so beyond the normal process of action, information items and action items coming before you for your consideration, you may remember on 10 years ago and even each cycle, usually it's a series of actions. So we'll say, what structure would you want? What are the modal funding ranges? What are the minimums and maximums? So there'll be a series of action items that go through the whole committee process like typical. But in addition to that, because of the nature of the work and we're really building up the solicitation from the ground up again, we are proposing a policymaker work group. This would be a work group of probably 8 to 12 people. That would be a mixture of both TAB and Met Council Transportation Committee members. This worked quite well 10 years ago when we did this process. So those would be separate meetings, and we'll talk about the commitment for that group, similar to the TPP group that we're on right now. There'll also be a technical steering committee made up of members of our subcommittees as well as other modal or topic experts as we need to bring them in for some of these new topics like resiliency and carbon reduction. And then we're calling them special issue working groups. So there may be opportunities for policymakers to be involved on some of those as well. Molly?
All right, so as Steve mentioned, there's a number of action items or decision points is what we're calling them throughout this process. And our process is going from.
Can you hold up to that?
Can we go back a slide? So this is kind of a continuation of what we started discussing in December. And my concern, which I've expressed a number of times, is the interaction or relatedness of the active transportation funding stream and the federal funds. And so as I look at this particular graph, I don't see how the active transportation fund working group interacts with the federal funds and the standard around the legislation that requires a similar solicitation process, whether or not we're going to use the same application, get out money fast or slow. So, I mean, first of all, I think it would be helpful if Elaine, once we get through all this, that you send out an email with what the 3 committees are, and then let people respond to the totality of this. But I'm still concerned that there's not enough interaction that I'm seeing between the active transportation sales tax funding and the regional solicitation, because I believe that they're important together.
So Mr. Chair and Commissioner, it's a good question. Some of those are yet to be solved, and you've got your pulse on the active transportation, and we've got your name on a future slide here coming up. But we are planning the first work group of that active transportation, I'll call it policy group. We're going to try and schedule it the first part of February to go into the legislative session. If there are any questions that need to be answered or tweaks made to the legislation based on discussions on what this body would like to do with that money, we'd still have time to have that conversation with the legislature. So that will be a top line item, our first group that we're going to be hoping to form. And that's one of the slides upcoming. But how it interacts with the solicitation, timing, money-wise or not, we've heard from, we've got a lot of opinions on that. That's, I think, what the working group is going to have to help us get through.
Member Geisler has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Peterson, just because it's the top of the year and we got a lot of new folks, can we talk about what the concern is there of the active transportation solicitation, the regional solicitation, and why we're having this conversation? Just a little context setting. I understand I might not be all prepared, but.
Yeah, so for the Mr. Chair and member guys, or for the new members here, last session, as part of the regional sales tax, a portion of the money that went to transit, so 5% of that portion, what amounts to about $24 million a year, is directed at TAB for their discretion for active transportation. So what that means is primarily bicycle and pedestrian uses, so active transportation is the terminology there. The legislation, the language around it says that the process should be a competitive process. It has a list of criteria that need to be used. It's not clear as to whether other criteria or rules can be added to it, but it does say it should follow to the maximum extent practicable the regional solicitation process. So I think that's what Commissioner Holberg is asking on. We've got some of our attorneys looking at the language. What does that mean? As far as kind of the openness of the process, or how close or does it not have to be the regional solicitation? So that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you.
But the good thing is it's non-federal money. So this is a regional sales tax, and so especially for our smaller projects, it's advantageous not to go through the federal process. And we heard from our TAC members especially, that they didn't want to mix these $2. They don't want to put some regional sales tax money in and some federal transportation dollars into it, because even $1 federal dollars going into the project federalizes the project and makes them go through a different process, which can be onerous, especially on those small projects. Long story there, but.
Go ahead.
Okay, back to you here. Where were you? Right there, Molly?
Okay, so we've broken our process into 4 decision points. Our whole process started back last fall, and we'll go through the early part of 2026. So the first decision point, or each decision point is focused on the regional solicitation, as Steve mentioned. There's active transportation funding that will also be incorporated into that, but knowing that there's no current application process, these decision points maybe are more applicable to regional solicitation. So our first decision point is focusing on whether we should keep the structure as is or turn to an alternate structure. And then from there, understanding what that application structure looks like, the details of it, and then finally what the final product looks like, so we can roll it out as part of the 2026 solicitation. So as part of this first decision point then, schedule laid out here addresses kind of the key action or the key tasks that will be associated with that. So as Steve mentioned, we're working to formulate these working groups. So there'll be a policymaker working group that will focus on the regional solicitation, and then one specific to the active transportation funding. In addition to the technical steering committee, the special issue working groups, and then we'll also have some public and equity engagement that is feathered into there as well. And then some of the key technical tasks associated with this phase include doing a summary of how the spending's been done the last 10 years as part of the regional solicitation, and what are some key takeaways, and then doing a peer review of MPOs throughout the country to try and get some ideas of how they are doing their solicitations, both from an active transportation funding perspective potentially, and just the regional federal money that they distribute. And that will help to guide the decision point at the end of this, which is, do we keep with the structure or change?
Member Holberg?
Thank you, and I'm sorry, and I'm kind of a stickler here, so maybe this is my confusion point. So when I look at the title of this, the Regional Solicitation Evaluation Working Group Structure, are you applying this grid to just the federal funds? Or is it also going to include active transportation? I mean, that's the yin and the yang of this, if we're going to have the same application or not. And so in my little brain, can you clarify, is this schedule only for the federal funds? And we're going to look at the opportunity to get state funds out faster? I mean, moving forward, it'd be really helpful to me if we're really explicit when we talk about some of these schedules and groups, which funding streams they're going to apply to in the titling of it, because I'm confused.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, the way we've approached this is regional solicitation is the larger umbrella under which all these funding sources fall. And I think that's confusing to some people that we've kind of done it in that manner. Whether the active transportation kind of fits in with our normal timeline and processes is something this group has to figure out. Because it could be on a different schedule, different application, or it could be embedded within. The first maybe fundamental question of that active transportation group is, do you want to do something in the short term? We've got money starting to accumulate on order of about $2 million per year once that money starts flowing, obviously, and in the bank account. So do you want to do something collectively as a group to get some money into projects on the street, benefiting the metro area in the short term, and what do you want to do more in the long term? So that first meeting of the active transportation group is going to start discussing that base level question on kind of short term versus long term schedules, interplay between the two.
Okay, so if I might, in order to be accurate or reflect the amount of indecision that we have around these two funding streams, like to just say draft decision point schedule number 1. I mean, in my mind, I'm hoping that we are gonna have the ability to get some of the sales tax money out faster than 2025. Eventually, I would like to see this grid show a line item for application structure for federal funds and a separate thing. I mean, that's where I'm headed individually. I'll put my cards on the table as I always do. There would be a different schedule and application process, at least in the short term, that could be a bit accelerated beyond riding along with the 2026 solicitation schedule for the federal funds. So I'm just, and I know it's kind of color commentary, but I don't like I like certainty, and I feel this feels very confusing and incomplete in its presentation.
Well, you want to be clear, so.
What?
I say you want to be clear, so you got to ask the question. Go ahead.
Anything else on this slide, Molly? Okay. So to round out the presentation, there'll be a number of ways that TAB members can be involved with this 2-year process called the Regional Solicitation Evaluation. Number 1 is the Policymaker Working Group. Again, that'll be meetings roughly quarterly, every 3 to 4 months, starting in April. The first meeting of that will be April. Probably 2-hour meetings, similar to the TPP working group if people have been involved in that. That group will be winding down, so some people are on both. Chair Hovland probably be on both of those. And you can be on both the TPP and this Regional Solicitation Evaluation Work Group, given the calendars and that one winding down.
Steve, where would meetings like that for anybody, where are meetings like that held when it's like these? Where do they do that?
Hopefully virtually.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep, that maybe is the difference between volunteering and not.
Well, it is. I mean, because, everything's time, and if somebody way out's got to come way in, it makes a difference. So good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, most of it will be virtual. So that's that's the second one. So first was unique projects scoring. The second one is this Policymaker Work Group. Doesn't start till April, but again, if there is interest, you can email Elaine. Third way is the active transportation working group. That'll be the next slide. We'll talk about that. But then there's other ways. So if you don't want to be on one of those committees, you can still be involved. The special issue working groups, there'll be listening sessions. We have roughly 30 of those planned throughout the region, both the policymaker level and technical level. A lot of those will be kind of February, March, April timeframe. We are planning a workshop. 10 years ago, we did I think a really successful workshop. This was up in Arden Hills at the Ramsey County facility for policymakers. We had over 100 policymakers from across the region attend and brainstorm what they want to do with this federal funding. So we're planning to do something similar this summer. And then obviously just coming to these meetings, you'll have both information items and action items over the course, mostly 18 months from now, but as we make decisions throughout the process. So last slide is on active transportation, and that's the one we'd like to kick off first, given the timing of the legislative session. The first meeting of that will probably be the first 2 weeks of February. We've got an email ready to go out with some potential dates, a doodle poll, the members that are interested. We talked about what some of that will be. We'll be going through the legislative language, we'll have our attorneys there too to to ask if there's clarifying questions that need to be made on that, and then talk about some of these high-level issues. Do we kind of intermix the money, the schedules, the timing? All of that will be in this first meeting. So it'll be primarily geared towards policymakers, but we do want to have those technical experts. There were a lot of really good opinions that I think bubbled up through the technical folks. So we've received a few volunteers from TAB so far, and I've put those on the screen. We probably do need some more city reps. So we got several counties, some citizen reps. I know Brian, where's he at? Yep. Brian, you had volunteered via email here, so I'll add your name to the list as well. But probably do need a couple more cities to round that out here. So we'll send out meeting invites, and again, that's probably starting, the first meeting will be the virtual again, first 2 weeks of February, and that group is slated to meet up to about every other month or so, I think we have on the schedule, depending on the work there, so. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you and see if there's questions.
All right,
Thanks.
I have a question from Mr. Geisler.
Thank you,
Member
Mr. Chair. Elaine, I was just wondering, could we get these various meetings as they're scheduled sent out to the tab for just guest or attendee options if they're not on it? All of these are really interrelated with each other. There's going to be a whole lot happening. Even the ability to either watch a YouTube recording or just ride along would be great as we're going, because I think it'd be really easy for us to go multiple ways and then have to recombine everything back, and maybe staff won't hate us quite so much then.
Then we want a variety of people too. We don't want the same ones doing everything.
Yep.
That as well, and I think it just helps us keep up with all of these things that we're trying to address: active transportation and the regional solicitation and the special interest or special issues, and there's a lot happening all at once. So especially with the TPP winding down.
When we had previous, 10 years ago, when we had the reevaluation, we had web page. One of the web pages on the solicitation site does have that, and we had 2 policymaker work groups, and it was 2017 and 2019. And so we will keep all that information also as it comes up, all the tech memos, and we'll upload that information to that web page too. And I'll get that out to everybody too once that gets going.
Member Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So one specific question, I mean, again, I think Member Holbrook and I are on the same page about active transportation, seems very different. So that's why I volunteered to be on this. Very specific question about the active transportation, how we're going about it, all those details. Are there going to be sort of independent requests for feedback just on active transportation? Or is it going to be, we're only looking for feedback on this entire process and this is lumped in with it? And I guess I'm kind of like, just to show you my hand, I hope they're separate. I feel like there's a lot of people want to comment specifically on how should this money with far fewer strings attached get used. And so I'm just curious if that's something in the plan that you've talked about for how that decision-making process works separately for a very large chunk of money.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The work group will certainly be separate. We do have to keep an eye on, we're also putting a bunch of federal money into maybe similar or the same project types. So we have to kind of keep an eye on what the group collectively wants to do on the federal funds in the long term for bike ped uses too. But this active transportation group will be focused, I'd say, solely on the regional sales tax.
Okay, so that answers part of the question, but the really specific one is, because the regional solicitation does get public comment, I mean, that is like a key piece of it. Are there going to be prompts that are solely for active transportation as a separate collection of public comment? That's really what I'm getting at.
Mr. Chair and Member Johnson, I think I'd have to think about that more, because you're saying if it's on a different schedule, are we still going to get that same level of public input? Because people likely will want to say things just about this funding source.
Yeah, and like also you'd have to define it for people and tell them this is not just active transportation, but active transportation sales tax, and then define all the differences. This is not an easy thing to figure out, but maybe that's something we can talk about in the work group as well in that first meeting about how do we get public engagement on this money. And the second part is more just a comment. I actually really am happy that Member Foster brought up alternates as a pool of people who can also be involved in volunteering on these committees. So again, if you're an alternate and you're watching at home, like it's gonna be you too. The one specific thing I would say is, this came up in our orientation on Friday, so maybe Elaine, if you want to speak to this at all, the idea that even if an alternate doesn't feel quite prepared to be on a working group yet, that they could still be on like the list to attend meetings, even if they're not a voting member. I thought that was a really interesting way to get alternates engaged early and hopefully stay engaged. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Peterson?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation and all your work. I just wanted to potentially connect a couple topics from today. So we spoke at length about the safety issues and where there are opportunities to leverage this board towards interventions that can bring down deaths. And then we have the active transportation working group and the monies which potentially have fewer strings attached and a speedier timeline towards implementation. So I would just encourage this board to think about ways that we can bring those two things together and potentially seek ways to use some of the active transportation funding in targeted ways that can also be attacking the safety issues that are, you know, as we see, claiming hundreds of lives every year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda. The only thing would be if anyone has any good of the organization or want to bring something up.
MPCA.
Is he here?
Yes, he's here.
Oh, all right. I guess Frank is here from the MPCA. Do you want to give a report?
Sure, yes, thank you. And the quick report would be that last week EPA announced that Minneapolis and St. Paul school districts received just under $69 million for electric school bus implementation. That'll bring about 198 electric buses to those two school districts in the coming years. And then the Pollution Control Agency has posted our climate pollution reduction implementation grant, or sorry, our Priority Climate Action Plan. The draft version of that is on our website for comment and review, and that is looking for the climate pollution reduction program, which is $4.3 billion grant program from EPA for climate pollution reduction and other air pollution and other co-benefits for all states that accepted that fund.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Again, I'll go back to, does anyone have anything that they want to bring up to the group? Seeing,
Mr. Chair, I'll move to adjourn early for once.
I was just going to do that, so I have a motion by Holberg.
Williams, second.
Second by Williams to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same sign. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for putting up with me.
Good job.
We'll see you next month.